Hey guys, welcome back to the Chessyard. This is Dhairya Bagga, and today I'll be showing you how to defeat the Caro Kann Defense. Now, the Caro Kann Defense is a very solid opening for black, which starts off with pawn c6 followed by d5. I have already discussed the lines if you're playing from black in one of my previous videos, so I'm placing the link in the description below for those who haven't watched it yet. Now, the question comes how to defeat that defense if it's so solid. So that's what I will be trying to cover today. So let's start off with the game. White starts off with pawn e4, black responds with c6, and I go with d4. Now, the theory always says that whenever you get a chance to occupy the center, always go ahead straight away. Do not let black occupy the center. So that's what I did by moving the d4 pawn. He responds with pawn d5, and now the computer is suggesting to capture. Though I don't prefer this way, I prefer crossing it to e5. Now, let's go back and see what if you capture it. So, suppose I capture, black will capture back with the pawn. After some basic development moves, what we'll see is that this empty c file will always haunt the white in future. So suppose these basic development moves are done, white castles, and black gets the rook on the c file. Now this c file is very important from black to attack because, as you see, the king side hasn't developed yet. The queen side has been completely developed by taking out the minor pieces. You have given away the c pawn with the idea that now probably you will develop further pieces and go for attack towards the center, or maybe even and on the king side in future. So this can actually go in the favor of black here. So rather, I would say do not capture, but go for moving the pawn forward as I did in the game. Now here, black develops bishop to f5 again with the idea that later on he will give away this c6 pawn by moving it forward maybe, and then get his rook on the c5 by moving it to c8, and then the bishop and the rook combination will be attacking on the c2 square, which becomes a vulnerability for white. So I saw the threat coming. I moved my bishop to d3 with the idea that you can go for the exchange. I capture back with my queen, and my queen will also be developed in the process. But here he denied the exchange, obviously because it's not good for him, because this is one of the key attackers in the game here. So he moved it back to g6. Now, it's a very bad move if you think that you can just eliminate this bishop straight away by capturing here, because if you capture, you are actually opening the h file, and after some common development moves, the game can somehow look like this, where the h file is always open now, the defender only being the knight, which can be kicked away either by moving the pawns or by some other sacrifice. That would easily lead to your checkmate from the h file, which is always a threat in these kind of games when you have opened the h file. So rather, do not go for the bishop exchange immediately, and go for basic development moves. So that's what I tried to go do here. I developed my knight on f3 here. My opponent responds with pawn e6, trying to make ways for some queen for his queen move, and I go for attacking the queen directly by moving my bishop to g5. I have also developed my bishop here. Developing the bishop here on the b2 square doesn't make sense because your pawns are in the way of your long diagonal. So your dark square bishop will not be doing much in this game. So rather go for the exchange. He tries to offer me the exchange, but here instead of capturing straight away, I tried moving my h pawn with the idea that if you capture, I can capture back with either my knight or my pawn, dependent on how I'm trying to play the game. So he also didn't go for the capture, because if he would have gone for the capture with his bishop, and I take back with the pawn, my h file will be open then. Again, a threat can be seen for black here if he castles on the king side if the h file is open. So nobody wants to open the h file this early in the game. So I developed my knight on d2 here. and he tries to pin my knight by moving his bishop on h5. So now I went for the exchange because the dark square bishop can be pushed away next move by moving the pawn maybe, or pawn. Yes, he will move his pawn on the f6, trying to kick away, because after I capture with my e pawn as well, he can capture back with his g pawn, and then I have to move him a bishop. So I rather captured it because there is no active square remaining for the dark square bishop if I take it backwards. He captures back with the knight, and now I develop my knight on the f1 here, with the idea that in the next move I can probably go on the g3 square and try to kick away this bishop from here and go for the exchange. He moved pawn a6 here. Maybe he's trying to open the queen side because he's not seeing anything going from for his in his favor from the king side. And that's what I did as per my plan by moving the knight to g3. I'm asking some questions on this light square bishop for black. I want to eliminate this bishop because this is probably the last threat remaining in the game. As he offers me here, I push my pawn forward on the h file. Now he has to definitely go for the capture. He has no other option. Plus, his h file will also not get opened. So, yeah, completely in the favor of white here. He captures, I capture back with the queen. As you can see, it is still a solid opening, but we have handled it well from white. Our both the knights are developed. His queen can only come on the diagonal here. It is blocked in the center, whereas the white queen can go towards both the diagonals, can go to the b3 and attack this pawn which is not being defended on b7. So pretty much pretty so there are so many ideas for white here. You can also push your h pawn forward and try to create some pressure on the king side, which is, and the king is still in the center for both the sides. Also, white can castle to queen side or the king side depending on how black responds here. So he tried to break the center by pushing his pawn on c5. I capture back, and he takes back with the knight, and I push my queen to d4 here. The idea being you have to move away your knight immediately. If you don't, you can actually provide some support as well, but that's a good square for my queen for now. He stops the queen from capturing the knight by developing his queen to c7, which is also a good square for queen always. Then I start pushing my h pawn further to h6, which he doesn't capture, of course, because otherwise Rook will capture back, and the h file will also be open for white. Now, I actually play this move very often in my games, the h pawn to h6, or even the a pawn to a6, dependent on where the king is for the opponent. The idea behind this is that this is always a threat once you castle on the king side. Suppose here the black castles, I only have to get my queen somehow on the g7 and checkmate the opponent. There's no way that you can defend this once the diagonal gets opened somehow. I also, if suppose your queens get exchanged, all the pieces get exchanged, you are left with one of the rook in the end game. The king is always trapped behind these pawns here. So all you need to do is get the rook in the eighth rank, and the opponent will be checkmated because he cannot move to the g7 as it is protected by the h6 pawn. So a very good tactic which I always use in my games. Now I try to apply pressure towards the king side further by moving my knight to g5. Now here my opponent castles, and as soon as he castles, computer is suggesting the game has drifted a bit in the favor of black here. Although computer was suggesting g5 is not such a good move, till then it was a draw situation. It says, because it's suggesting that the knight can go to the d7, but if knight goes to d7, I can probably move my f pawn to uh, f4 here, because then I'll be protecting this pawn by a couple of pieces. The only move then with the queen would be to capture the c pawn. I can castle on the king side. That should be still okay for white here. But in the game, he castles on the king side, and now we start attacking on this file. The idea being once the queen comes to the f4, there is no one stopping this checkmate here. He sees the threat and develops his knight on f5. We capture back with the knight, which he captures back with the pawn here. So multiple exchanges happening. So I castle now on the king side because I saw that this h6 pawn is very stable and solid there. There is no threat happening to it. And now I can go for the attack from the queen side by aligning my rooks on the e or d file, trying to push this pawn forward on the e file, and attacking the pawn on d file by getting both the rooks on e and d respectively. So here he offers me another exchange by getting his knight there. So I went for it, captured it back with the pawn. So now again, the whole idea of this game relies on that somehow I have to make some queen moves, maybe from the diagonal, enter the seventh rank, and then checkmate the opponent, or maybe get this pawn away from here, give it, sacrifice it, and then try to enter this diagonal and checkmate the opponent from the seventh rank. So I started developing my rook here on the e file, making sure that if my queen moves away from here, there is still a defender for this isolated pawn here. He tries to attack, align his queen and rook, and trying to attack on the c2 square here. So I move the pawn one step ahead on c3, trying to make sure that there's no threat on the c file. I'm not giving away pawns for free. Pawns are very good for the end game here. So now he's offering me the queen exchange, and in fact, actually, so the game is slightly in the favor of black here. My this So actually he has multiple center pawns here, which will be tough to control. So I didn't want to go for the capture immediately. So I moved my queen to g5. He takes it back to c7, attacking this pawn, but I have got a defender, so nothing to worry. I get my other rook also into the picture by moving it to d1. And now he's again offering the queen here for exchange, which I don't want to give because my whole plan was to get the queen somehow to g7 and checkmate the opponent. So I'm trying to delay it. Also, the fundamental rules, it's very simple. If your opponent is asking you for the exchange, and generally don't go for the queen exchange immediately, rather do it on your own terms. So now he's threatening the queen by moving his rook to c4. Now I also give him the rook with the idea that if he captures, I'll not capture back with the queen, but I will rather capture with my c pawn, so that this pawn on d5 will not advance further. And that's what happened in the game. I captured back with the c pawn here. So now I'm restricting these pawn movements further. Everything is in control. Now he moves his queen to a5 with a double threat, attacking the rook as well as the pawn on a file a2. So I get my rook on the c1 with the idea that I can get my rook on the seventh rank here, and this seventh rank can also will also create pressure on the king side here. But seventh rank is also protected with the queen, which I saw a bit later. Now he has moved his pawn to b5, which gives me some space. Probably in future, I would try to come on the sixth rank. For the time being, I move to g file with the idea that now here I can come to the e7 square and then go for the checkmate. He again offers me the queen exchange. I deny it. Now he gets his rook on the seventh rank, understanding the threat of checkmate from there. So I get my rook on c6. Now I'll start capturing the pawns. He tries to attack my rook. I capture the a pawn first, so that once these a and b pawns are gone, I can probably develop another piece here. Then he moves his queen to d8 here. I threaten it by moving my rook to d6. Some normal continuation happening in this middle game here. Then he moves his queen to e7. I take it. I take my queen to c1 with the idea that I can now go on the eighth rank in the next move, which he protects with his rook on f8. So I decided to go on the c6. Now this pawn on e6 is being attacked twice and has only got one defender. And here he makes another mistake by moving the queen to h4. Now his idea is to capture the pawn on h6 and remove the permanent threat of checkmate, which is lying on him. So I first capture the pawn on e6. He captures the pawn on h6. But here my rook and queen are towards the king side in the opponent's court. My I'm winning as per the computer as well by 5.5 points here. So now I'm trying to go on the seventh rank. He moves his pawn to f4. I capture on the d5, giving him a check. He has to move to the only square remaining for him, which was the h8 here. And now I try to stop the pawn on f file by moving f3. Now this was a bad move from me because here the computer suggesting the game, which was in completely in favor of white, is now turned into a draw situation, because here some repetition can happen once black starts to do, and that's what black was doing. He came to h4 with the idea that next move is e1, and then he can repeat this diagonal checks to the king. There's no other way to stop the king because the queen is not in the picture, the rook is not in the picture. So it will be a draw from here. But actually, the time was very tricky part in this game as well, because it's a 5 minute blitz game. So both of us, because of such a complicated middle game, were running a bit bad on timing here. So I also didn't see this bad move happening. So I moved it instantly without thinking, because I was also under time pressure here. I tried to still go towards the king side, maybe with the idea that I can probably pull it somehow if he misses the draw. He starts giving me check constantly. I started moving my king away as much as possible. He is repeating. I'm letting him repeat. There's no other option for me. And here, black does the mistake, the final mistake of the game, by moving the queen away and not going for the draw. Again, as you see in many of the games, if you don't go for the draw in a draw situation, you end up losing them. He went to h6. Now the computer suggesting that the white is completely winning here. I offered him the rook, that you can take it. I'll just win this game. He captures back. I capture the rook. Now it's completely in the favor of white because I have two center pawns here which cannot be stopped. Also, he lost on time here, so the game ended. It was a good win for white here, as you see. So yeah, that's how you defeat the Caro Kann defense. Actually, I hope you understood the lines here, and I wish that everyone experiments it and shows their result in the comments below. Do let me know how it went for you. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do share in your chessmates circle, and then yeah, let's play this match somewhere down the line. Yeah, all right. Take care. Bye bye.